The glass exploded inward before Catherine Parker's mind could name the sound. Rifle fire. 300 meters, northeast elevation. Her body reacted to intelligence her conscious mind hadn't processed yet, muscle memory from a life she'd buried under cardigans and playground schedules. She hit Sungmin with the full weight of her athletic frame, driving him down onto the Seoul sidewalk as the second shot vaporized the stone pillar where his head had been. The third round punched through her right shoulder, spinning her halfway around. The fourth carved a furrow across her temple, painting her vision red. But her arms never loosened around the 10-year-old boy pressed beneath her, his formal navy suit crumpling against the asphalt as she became his living shield. The afternoon street transformed into a kill box in 18 seconds flat. Black smoke from a detonated motorcycle billowed across the intersection, while tactical operatives in unmarked gear materialized from construction vans that had been idling since dawn. The Baekho Syndicate's security detail scattered like startled birds, expensive suits and cheap training colliding with professional violence. But Catherine had felt the shift 90 seconds earlier. She'd been adjusting Sungmin's school tie when her combat-trained instincts screamed warnings her nanny persona couldn't explain. The white panel vans circling the block 3 times, the utility workers whose tool belts held no tools, the unnatural silence before a storm. She'd survived too many times in field hospitals where gunfire was the soundtrack to triage. Invisible people see everything. They have to. Her grandmother's voice cut through the chaos as Catherine dragged Sungmin's trembling body behind an overturned vendor cart, her blood leaving a crimson trail on the concrete. She had spent 2 years being invisible in the Baekho household. A black woman navigating Seoul's elite circles, looked through rather than at, her worth measured in punctuality and silence. They had no idea that the hands now stanching her shoulder wound with her torn cardigan had once held together soldiers while artillery shook the earth. That the eyes scanning for secondary shooters had learned to read violence the way others read morning newspapers. Sungmin sobbed against her chest, his small fingers clutching her blood-soaked sweater. The pain was there, bright and insistent, but Catherine pushed it into a mental drawer she'd learned to close during deployments her resume would never mention. She counted heartbeats, calculated angles, identified the extraction point. Across the smoke and screaming, Kim Jun-woo moved like winter incarnate. The head of the Baekho Syndicate fought with the cold precision of a man who'd built an empire on calculated brutality. Catherine had existed in his peripheral vision exactly twice, once during her hiring interview where he'd never met her eyes, and once when she'd brought Sungmin his forgotten lunch and he'd looked straight through her as if she were furniture. Now, his dark eyes locked onto her across the chaos, and she watched something crack in that icy composure. He saw her, truly saw her, for the first time. Not the disposable help, not the invisible nanny, but the woman who'd paid for his son's life with her own blood, who was still moving with tactical precision even as crimson bloomed across her neutral-toned cardigan. Jun-woo cleared the remaining attackers with methodical violence before sliding across the blood-slicked pavement to where Catherine had positioned herself and Sungmin behind hard cover. His hands that had signed death warrants without trembling, shook as they reached for her face, searching the blood trail at her temple. "Catherine," he said, and the fact that he knew her name detonated something in her chest that had nothing to do with the bullets in her body. "Stay with me. Stay with me." Through the gathering darkness at the edges of her vision, Catherine managed 4 words that would change everything. Get him to safety. Not herself, not first. Him. And in that moment, Kim Jun-woo understood that the most dangerous person in his organization had been the one he'd never bothered to see at all. Welcome to Afro Soul's storybook, and darling, you just crossed a threshold you can't uncross. This isn't some fairy tale romance where the prince saves the princess. This is blood and power wrapped in Armani suits. This is a legacy stolen and a woman ready to burn the world to take it back. Subscribe to watch more of our daily stories and comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far this storm is spreading, and hit that like button. Catherine's fingers found the bright yellow delivery bag still strapped across her torso, the same cheerful bag she'd carried through Seoul's wealthy districts for 2 years, invisible as air. Now it became a lifeline. She ripped it open with her teeth, dumping its contents across the alley floor. Granola bars for Sungmin's after-school snacks, wet wipes, a small first aid kit she'd kept from habit. The habit of someone who'd once worked trauma under mortar fire. "Close your eyes," she told Sungmin, her voice steady despite the blood pooling beneath her shoulder. The boy obeyed immediately, pressing his face into the grimy alley wall as Catherine packed the shoulder wound with gauze and sealed it with duct tape from the bag's emergency pocket. The temple graze could wait. The shoulder was the bleeder. She worked with mechanical precision, her hands moving through protocols muscle memory refused to forget. Pack, pressure, secure. The pain was white-hot, but pain was just information. What mattered was the next 60 seconds, then the 60 after that. Survival was a series of present moments strung together like bloody pearls. "We're going to move now," Catherine said, pulling Sungmin against her good side. "Stay low, stay quiet. When I say run, you run." The boy nodded, his formal navy suit jacket torn at the elbow, his face streaked with tears and concrete dust. But his eyes held something new, a fragile, fierce trust that made Catherine's chest tighten around her cracked rib. They moved through Seoul's industrial underbelly like ghosts, Catherine's training resurfacing with each calculated turn. She chose routes blocked from sniper sightlines, paths too narrow for vehicular pursuit. The yellow bag, now empty and blood-stained, hung from her shoulder like a tattered flag of surrender. But Catherine Parker had never surrendered in her life. 3 blocks away, Kim Jun-woo stood in the aftermath of the ambush, his tailored black suit spattered with blood that wasn't his own. Bodies littered the street, some his security detail, most the tactical team that had orchestrated the hit. His phone rang 17 times in 3 minutes. Reports, damage control, demands for orders. He ignored them all. His eyes remained fixed on the blood trail leading into the alley where Catherine Parker had disappeared with his son. His son, Sungmin, the heir to everything Jun-woo had built from violence and vision, the boy whose life had been purchased by a woman Jun-woo had classified as furniture. "Sir," his second-in-command, Choi Jae-sung, approached with military precision. "The perimeter is secure. Medical teams are en route. We need to find her." Jun-woo's voice cut like winter wind. "The nanny, Catherine Parker. Find her now." Jae-sung blinked, momentarily thrown. In the hierarchy of crisis response, a foreign domestic worker ranked somewhere below building damage assessment, but something in Jun-woo's expressions silenced any protest. "She took 4 rounds protecting Sungmin. She's bleeding out somewhere in this city, and every second we waste is another second she dies for my failures." The word choice hung in the air like accusation. Not "my son's safety" or "our security." My failures. Jae-sung had served Jun-woo for 12 years and had never heard the Winter Dragon claim personal failure for anything. "Mobilize everyone," Jun-woo ordered. "I want traffic cameras, street surveillance, hospital alerts. If she so much as bleeds on a sidewalk, I want to know about it." It took them 47 minutes to locate Catherine. She'd made it to a shuttered industrial complex in Mule-gurung, a neighborhood where questions died before they were born. Jun-woo arrived in an unmarked vehicle with a private medical team, half expecting to find a crime scene. Instead, he found Catherine Parker sitting upright against a concrete pillar, her makeshift bandages holding, her good arm wrapped protectively around Sungmin. The boy was asleep against her chest, exhausted by terror and adrenaline crash. Catherine's eyes tracked Jun-woo's approach with the same tactical awareness she'd demonstrated during the ambush. "The wound needs proper suturing," she said before he could speak, "but I've controlled the bleeding. He's unharmed. Minor abrasions only." Jun-woo stared at this woman he'd never truly seen. Her short, natural hair was matted with blood. Her neutral cardigan hung in tatters, but her spine remained straight, her gaze steady, her voice carrying the authoritative calm of someone who'd commanded under fire. "Who are you?" The question emerged raw, stripped of his usual control. Catherine's lips quirked in something too bitter to be a smile. "I'm the nanny, Mr. Kim, the one you hired 2 years ago, the one you've looked at exactly twice." The medical team moved forward, but Catherine held up her hand. "Sungmin first. Check him for shock, then me." It wasn't a request. Jun-woo found himself nodding to his team, watching as they gently extracted his sleeping son from Catherine's protective grip. Only then did she allow them to examine her wounds, her jaw tight as they cut away the improvised bandages. "You were a medic," Jun-woo observed. "It wasn't a question." "Combat medic, 3 deployments, but that's not on my resume." Catherine's eyes met his. "People like you don't hire people like me if they know we've seen war. You want invisible. You want forgettable. You want someone who won't ask questions when money smells like blood." The accusation landed like a blade between his ribs, true and fatal. "I'm sorry," Jun-woo said, and meant it with a sincerity that surprised them both. The private hospital Jun-woo controlled occupied 3 floors of an unremarkable building in Gangnam. Catherine woke in a room that looked like luxury hospitality until you noticed the bulletproof glass and the armed guards stationed at intervals that suggested military training rather than private security theater. Sungmin sat in a chair beside her bed, his formal suit replaced with clean clothes, his eyes red but dry. When he saw Catherine awake, he didn't cry. He simply reached for her hand with both of his, holding on like she might disappear. "You're safe," Catherine said automatically, the medic in her assessing the boy for delayed trauma responses. "So are you," Sungmin whispered back. Jun-woo entered without knocking, carrying a folder that looked ominous in its thinness. He'd changed into fresh clothes, another black suit that made him look like an elegant executioner, but his eyes carried something new, something that looked almost like respect. "Your wounds will heal. The surgery required surgery, but the surgeon assures me you'll retain full mobility. The temple graze was superficial." Catherine nodded, accepting the information without gratitude. She'd already assessed her own damage. She knew what her body could survive. "I've increased security, tripled the guard rotations, brought in specialists from... Guards can be bought, specialists can be turned. You're building a fortress around a compromised foundation." The room went silent. Even Sung-min seemed to hold his breath. Jun-woo's expression shifted through several calculations before settling on cold curiosity. "Explain." "This wasn't random," Catherine said, pushing herself upright despite her shoulder's protest. "The timing was surgical. They knew exactly when we'd be on that street, exactly where your security blind spots were, exactly how many seconds they'd have before reinforcements arrived. That's not reconnaissance, that's inside information." She watched Jun-woo process this, saw the moment his paranoia aligned with her tactical assessment. "You're saying I have a mole?" "I'm saying you have multiple points of compromise," Catherine corrected, "and throwing more guards at the problem just gives them more people to corrupt." Jun-woo crossed to the window, his silhouette sharp against the bulletproof glass. "Then what do you suggest?" Jun-woo asked. "Teach him," Catherine said simply, gesturing to Sung-min. "Teach him to survive without an army, because the next time someone comes for him, I might not be there to bleed instead." The session started the next morning in a converted storage room Jun-woo had cleared of surveillance equipment. Catherine insisted on the privacy. What she needed to teach couldn't be documented. Sung-min sat cross-legged on the floor, his young face serious. Catherine moved slowly, her shoulders still healing, but her mind sharp as surgical steel. "Close your eyes," she instructed. "Tell me what you hear." Sung-min obeyed. "Nothing. It's quiet." "Listen deeper. The building has a voice. Let it speak." Minutes passed. Then, footsteps in the hallway. 2 people, maybe 3. Good. What else? The air conditioning. It clicks before it starts. Sung-min's eyes remained closed, his breathing steady. "There's someone in the room above us, walking. Heavy steps. A man." Catherine smiled. "You're learning the symphony of a building. Every structure has patterns, weight distributions, mechanical rhythms, human movements. When those patterns break, that's when danger walks in. She spent the next hour teaching him to differentiate between the natural creaking of settling architecture and the deliberate sound of someone trying to move quietly. She showed him how to read shadows under doorways, how to feel air pressure changes when windows opened in adjacent rooms, how to taste metal on his tongue when adrenaline spiked in his bloodstream. This is the signature of violence. It announces itself before it arrives. You just have to learn the language. Sung-min absorbed everything with the fierce concentration of a child who'd learned that invisibility could be a weapon. Is this what you learned in the war? This is what I learned staying alive, Catherine corrected. The war just gave me practice. By the third day, Sung-min could identify approaching footsteps by their gait, distinguish between casual patrol patterns and tactical positioning, and recognize the subtle shift in a room's atmosphere when someone entered with violent intent. He was 10 years old and learning to read murder like a storybook. Jun-woo watched from the doorway sometimes, silent as a grave. Catherine could feel his presence without seeing him, could sense the questions he didn't ask. Why are you doing this? What do you want? How did I miss you? She never answered what he didn't voice, but she felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing, no longer looking through her, but at her, studying her the way a scholar studies scripture. The security footage arrived on the 5th day of Catherine's recovery. Jun-woo's chief of security, a man named Director Han, presented it with bureaucratic efficiency. 3 hours of dashcam recordings from the vehicles in Sung-min's security convoy, traffic camera feeds from the intersection, and building surveillance from nearby shops. We've analyzed every frame, Director Han reported. No obvious signs of coordination between the attackers and our personnel. The assault appears to have been executed by an external... Pause there, Catherine said suddenly. She'd been reviewing the footage from her hospital bed, her shoulder still bandaged, but her mind operating at full capacity. Rewind 15 seconds. The black sedan, driver's side window. Han complied with obvious reluctance. This foreign nanny had no business inserting herself into security analysis, but Jun-woo's sharp gesture silenced any protest. Catherine pointed at the screen. There, the driver's hand, outside the driver's window for exactly 3 seconds. Watch his fingers. The room leaned in. On screen, a hand extended from the sedan's window, fingers forming a quick configuration. Index and middle finger crossed, thumb extended, before withdrawing. It's a signal, Catherine said quietly. Old military hand sign. Means target acquired, initiate. Director Han's face drained of color. That vehicle is registered to our motor pool. The driver is... one of yours, Catherine finished. And he's not the only one. Look at the timestamp. That signal goes out 40 seconds before the first shot. Now check your security detail positioning at that exact moment. They scrubbed through the footage again. At 35 seconds before engagement, 2 of Jun-woo's guards shifted positions, creating a sightline gap that wouldn't exist naturally in proper protective formation. At 20 seconds, a 3rd guard's radio went silent, equipment failure logged in the incident report, but conveniently timed. 3 points of compromise, minimum. Driver signals the hit, guards create the gap, communications officer kills the radio net. Classic internal coordination. The silence in the room felt like vacuum before explosion. Director Han's career was ending in real time, his face a study in professional dissolution. Jun-woo's expression had gone absolutely still, the winter dragon calculating trajectories of consequence. The detail that was with us during the shooting, Jun-woo said softly, pull their service records, financial transactions, communications logs, everything. He turned to Catherine, and she saw something dangerous in his eyes, not anger at her, but recognition, calculation. You spotted this in what, 30 minutes of footage review? 22 minutes, Catherine corrected. I was looking for the wrong thing in the right place. Your security team was analyzing external threats, but I grew up learning that the most dangerous violence comes from inside, from people who know where you sleep, what you love, when you're most vulnerable." She held his gaze. "People like me learn to see what people like you miss, because we don't have the luxury of trusting uniforms and credentials. We only have our eyes." Jun-woo nodded slowly, and Catherine understood that something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer the invisible nanny. She was no longer even the courageous stranger who'd taken bullets for his son. She was the woman who saw the architecture of betrayal while his trained professionals had been studying shadows. "I want you to review everything," Jun-woo said. "Every security protocol, every personnel file, every pattern and procedure. I want you to find every crack in my fortress." Catherine looked at Sung-min, who watched this exchange with intelligent eyes. The boy who'd learned to hear danger in footsteps, the boy who'd stopped crying and started listening. "I'll do it on one condition," she said. "When we find the rot, we don't just cut it out. We rebuild from the foundation, because your son doesn't need a bigger army. He needs a smarter one." Jun-woo extended his hand, the same hand that had frantically searched her face for wounds in the aftermath of the ambush, the same hand that signed death warrants without hesitation. Catherine took it, her grip firm despite her healing shoulder. The fortress would stand, but first they had to burn it down. The legal documents arrived at Catherine's hospital room at 3 in the morning, delivered by Jun-woo's personal attorney, a woman whose designer suit couldn't quite mask the exhaustion of being summoned mid-sleep. Catherine was awake, running through security footage on a laptop, her shoulder throbbing with each heartbeat, but her mind refusing rest. "Mr. Kim requires your signature," the attorney said, spreading papers across the rolling bed table with practiced efficiency. "Multiple documents, time-sensitive." Catherine scanned the first page and felt her breath catch. Emergency guardianship papers. Sung-min's name in formal legal text, her own name beside it, in a designation that made her hands shake. Co-legal guardian, equal authority, irrevocable without dual consent. "This makes me the second most powerful person in the Baekho Syndicate, at least where the heir is concerned. Mr. Kim cannot make decisions regarding his son's welfare, education, or security without your approval, and you cannot be removed from Sung-min's life without court intervention that would require Mr. Kim's own testimony against you." Catherine looked up sharply. "He's making me untouchable. He's making you family, legal family, the kind that survives when everything else burns." She leaned forward, voice dropping. "There are people in the organization who will want to tie up loose ends when this purge begins. Witnesses who saw too much, outsiders who know too many names. You're both. But if you're family, if you're woven into the legal fabric of the heir's existence, then touching you means going through Mr. Kim himself." The documents continued. Financial accounts in her name, property holdings, access to resources that made her 2 years of nanny wages look like pocket change. Not payment, protection. The kind of protection that came with chains made of gold and legal precedent. "Why?" asked Catherine. The attorney's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Because you bled for his son when his entire security apparatus failed. Because you see threats his trained guards missed. Because," she paused, choosing words carefully, "because Kim Jun-woo has built an empire on knowing the value of assets, and he's finally realized you're the most valuable one he's ever overlooked." Catherine signed, not for the money or the status, but because she understood the strategic truth buried in these documents. She'd become a weapon Jun-woo couldn't afford to lose. And in this world, weapons that proved their worth got to survive. When she looked up, Jun-woo stood in the doorway. How long he'd been there, she couldn't say. His dark eyes held a question he didn't voice. "I'm in," Catherine said simply. "But we do this my way. No half measures. We find every traitor, every compromised asset, every weak link, and we burn them out." Jun-woo's smile was winter incarnate.
"I was hoping you'd say that." The Baekho Syndicate's quarterly dinner was an exercise in civilized menace. Held in a private dining hall that cost more per evening than most Seoul apartments cost per year, it gathered the organization's leadership around a table laden with delicacies and hidden agendas. Catherine had never attended. Nannies didn't rate invitations to the kingdom's inner sanctum. Until now. She entered on Jun-woo's arm, wearing a dress that cost more than her annual salary used to be, midnight blue silk that moved like water, elegant and severe. Her shoulder was still healing beneath the fabric, but she'd refused pain medication. She needed her mind sharp, her senses unfiltered. The room's conversation died like a candle in a vacuum. 12 pairs of eyes tracked her progress to the head table, where Jun-woo seated her at his right hand, the position traditionally reserved for his most trusted advisor. Several faces registered shock, a few showed calculation, one showed naked contempt. Director Han, demoted but not yet dismissed, sat 3 seats down. His mouth tightened as Catherine met his gaze levelly. Beside him, the convoy driver from the dashcam footage, a man named Park who'd given the hand signal, shifted uncomfortably in his formal wear. "Gentlemen," Jun-woo said, his voice carrying the absolute authority of winter wind. "Most of you know Catherine Parker as my son's nanny. I'm here to inform you that she now holds equal guardianship of my heir and serves as my personal security consultant. Her authority regarding Sung Min's safety is absolute. Any questions?" The silence held teeth. Catherine let her eyes travel around the table, reading the room the way she'd learned to read combat zones. Park's elevated pulse visible in his carotid artery, Director Han's controlled breathing that suggested rage management training. The man to her left, Chief Financial Officer Lee, whose stillness felt rehearsed rather than natural. The dinner proceeded with aggressive normalcy. Courses arrived like clockwork, conversation flowed around business matters, territorial disputes, upcoming opportunities that were crimes dressed in euphemism. Catherine ate sparingly, drank nothing, and watched. She saw Lee check his watch 3 times in 15 minutes, saw Park's eyes track the serving staff with unusual attention, saw the moment Director Han's phone vibrated silently against the table, once, then twice in rapid succession, a signal. "Mr. Kim," Catherine said quietly, her voice pitched to carry only to Jun-woo's ear. "The CFO is waiting for something, timeline specific, and Director Han just received confirmation it's about to happen." Jun-woo's expression never changed. His hand moved to his own phone beneath the table, a subtle gesture that would trigger silent alarms throughout his security apparatus. 2 minutes later, the lights died. Emergency backup illumination kicked in immediately, dim red bulbs that turned the elegant dining hall into something from a nightmare. Men rose from their chairs, hands moving toward concealed weapons with the reflexive ease of career criminals. Catherine remained seated, her eyes tracking movement in the crimson darkness. She saw Lee moving toward the kitchen entrance, saw Park positioning himself between Jun-woo and the main exit, saw Director Han's hand disappear into his jacket with practiced ease. "Gun," Catherine said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Director Han, left shoulder holster." Jun-woo moved with serpentine speed, his hand catching Han's wrist before the weapon cleared leather. The room erupted into violence so swift and brutal it felt choreographed, Jun-woo's loyal guards converging on Han, Park, and Lee simultaneously. Bodies hit walls, bones cracked. Someone screamed. Catherine didn't move. She simply watched the cascade of consequence unfold, her tactical assessment validated in real time. When the lights returned, 3 men lay face down on the expensive carpet, hands zip-tied behind their backs. The remaining syndicate leaders sat frozen, calculating their own survival odds. "Catherine identified the coordination," Jun-woo announced, his voice carrying preternatural calm despite the violence that had just erupted. He looked at Director Han, who glared up from the floor with pure hatred. "You were supposed to create a second hit during dinner, make it look like an external assault, eliminate myself and anyone loyal to me in one stroke." Jun-woo's smile could have frozen blood. "Did I miss anything, Catherine?"
The CFO was financing it, Catherine added. His watch checks were countdown monitoring. The kitchen entrance was the extraction route, and Park was meant to ensure you couldn't escape the kill box. She tilted her head, studying Han with clinical detachment. Military precision. Almost worked, but you forgot that invisible people see everything. We have to. The message landed like a blade through silk. You overlooked me, and it cost you everything. The missing witness was a woman named Mrs. Choi, an elderly seamstress who'd seen the tactical team staging in her building before the initial ambush. Jun-woo's remaining security had searched the upscale neighborhoods, the known associate addresses, the predictable locations. They'd found nothing. She's not hiding in expensive places, Catherine said, studying the case file in Jun-woo's private office. She's hiding where people like her feel safe, where people like you never go. She changed out of her designer dress and back into her old work clothes, worn jeans, a faded jacket, the yellow delivery bag now patched and cleaned, but still bearing faint bloodstains. When she looked in the mirror, she saw the woman she'd been, invisible, unremarkable, beneath notice. Perfect camouflage for the city's forgotten spaces. Catherine moved through Seoul's slums alone, over Jun-woo's vehement protests, but she'd been adamant. Armed guards would scatter witnesses like startled birds. She needed to be what she'd always been, just another face in the margins, someone who belonged to the invisible infrastructure that kept cities running. She found Mrs. Choi in a third-floor walk-up in Gurodong, living with her daughter's family in an apartment smaller than Jun-woo's closet. The old woman answered the door with obvious terror in her eyes, ready to slam it shut. Mrs. Choi, Catherine said in the Korean she'd learned during 2 years of invisibility, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because you're the only one who can identify the men who tried to kill a child. I don't know anything, Mrs. Choi whispered, but her hands trembled on the doorframe. Catherine pulled out her phone, showed the elderly woman a photo of Sung-min, not the formal portrait, but a candid shot Catherine had taken last week of the boy learning to read danger in footsteps, his young face serious with concentration. They tried to kill this child, Catherine said quietly. He's 10 years old. He likes dinosaurs and mathematics and asks too many questions. They shot at him because of who his father is. But he's just a boy, Mrs. Choi, and he's alive because I threw myself in front of the bullets. She let her jacket fall open, revealing the still healing shoulder wound, the surgical scar visible above her shirt collar. Mrs. Choi's resistance crumbled like ancient mortar. She'd seen Catherine on the street that day, had watched a black woman in a nanny's cardigan become a human shield. The old woman began to cry. They wore masks, she said through tears, but one of them, when he checked his equipment before they moved out, I saw his face, and I saw his tattoo, on his wrist, a white tiger. Catherine's blood went cold. The white tiger was the signature mark of Jun-woo's elite guard, the men who'd sworn absolute loyalty, the inner circle considered beyond corruption. Can you identify him? Catherine asked. Mrs. Choi nodded. I never forget a face. My mother taught me that. She said the world tries to make us invisible, so we must see everything. Catherine understood that lesson in her bones. She arranged for Mrs. Choi's protection, not through Jun-woo's compromised security, but through a women's shelter Catherine had researched, funded by corporations with no syndicate ties. She paid for it with her new resources, learning to wield wealth like the weapon it was. When she returned to Jun-woo's compound with Mrs. Choi's testimony, his face went through several calculations before settling on grim acceptance. My inner circle is compromised, he said. Your inner circle was purchased, Catherine corrected. Someone paid very well to get assets that close, and they're still out there waiting for another opening. The breach came at midnight, 3 days after the banquet purge. Catherine was in Sung-min's room. She'd moved into the adjacent suite, her mothering instinct refusing to sleep more than a wall away from the boy she'd bled for. They were reviewing tactical awareness exercises, Sung-min identifying the defensive advantages of his bedroom's architecture. Then she heard it, the sound that didn't belong. Under the bed, Catherine commanded. Now, silent protocol. Sung-min obeyed instantly, his training overriding his fear. Catherine moved to the door, her body positioning itself with combat-learned efficiency. She'd identified the breach point during her security review, a service tunnel in the east wing that connected to the main house through an old maintenance access. She'd recommended sealing it. Jun-woo's remaining security deemed it low priority. Their mistake.
She heard multiple footsteps, tactical spacing, professional discipline. 4 operators, maybe 5, moving towards Sung-min's wing with the confidence of people who knew the compound's layout intimately. More insiders, or the same insiders she hadn't identified yet. Catherine triggered the silent alarm she'd had installed, one that bypassed standard security channels and went directly to Jun-woo's phone. Then she moved. "Sung-min," she whispered. "Remember the classroom teaching? The passage behind the bookshelf?" Jun-woo had shown it to her during the security review, an escape route built into the mansion's architecture, dating back to when the compound housed political dissidents during military rule. Catherine had memorized it, made Sung-min practice it blindfolded. Now it would save his life. She heard the door to the suite corridor open, heard the tactical teams spreading out, checking rooms with military efficiency. They'd be at Sung-min's door in 30 seconds. Catherine triggered the bookshelf mechanism, a hidden switch disguised as an ornamental screw. The heavy oak swung inward, revealing darkness and concrete stairs descending into the compound's foundations. "Go," she told Sung-min. "Count 200 steps, then wait for me. If I don't come, keep going until you reach the exit. It opens onto the street 2 blocks north. Find a crowd, find witnesses, stay alive." "You're not coming?" Terror cracked his voice. "I'm coming," Catherine promised, "but first I have to slow them down." She'd identified the defensive advantages weeks ago during her security review. The bedroom's layout created a fatal funnel, a narrow doorway that forced attackers into a single-file approach. The heavy furniture provided hard cover, and Catherine had positioned certain items very specifically. When the first operator came through the door, Catherine was waiting with the heavy bronze statue from Sung-min's bookshelf. She'd chosen it during her first week of employment, not for its aesthetic value, but because it weighed 15 pounds and had a weighted base that made it perfect for close-quarters combat. The statue connected with the operator's temple with a sound like a car door slamming. He dropped senseless. The second operator through the door had his weapon up, but Catherine was already moving, using the fallen body as an obstacle. She drove her heel into his knee, the joint breaking with surgical precision, then stripped his weapon as he collapsed. She'd never stopped being a combat medic. She'd just added new skills to the resume. The remaining operators retreated, reassessing. Catherine used the seconds to drag furniture across the door, creating barricades. Then she disappeared into the passage after Sung-min, triggering the bookshelf to close behind her. They descended in darkness, Catherine counting steps while her hand rested protectively on Sung-min's shoulder. At 150 steps, she heard the bookshelf mechanism above them. The breach team had found the passage. "Run," Catherine commanded. They ran through ancient darkness, their footsteps echoing off stone walls that smelled of decades and desperation. Behind them, tactical flashlights cut through the black like searching fingers. Catherine's shoulder screamed with each jarring step, her healing wound threatening to tear open. But she kept Sung-min ahead of her, kept her body between the boy and the hunters, kept moving toward the exit she'd memorized from blueprints. The passage opened onto a service alley exactly where the plans promised. Catherine emerged first, weapon up, scanning for secondary teams. The street was empty. Commercial district, closed for the night, perfect for an ambush or an escape, depending on who controlled the variables. She pulled Sung-min out and moved toward the nearest main road, toward witnesses and crowds and the safety of public space. Behind them, the breach team emerged from the passage.
Then Jun-woo's vehicle screeched around the corner, not his usual luxury sedan, but an armored SUV driven with lethal precision. He'd received her silent alarm and calculated her most likely extraction route. The Winter Dragon moved like lightning from the vehicle, his own weapon in hand. His security team, new faces Catherine had vetted personally, spreading out with professional efficiency. The breach team scattered, but Jun-woo's forces were faster, better positioned, absolutely ruthless. It ended in 90 seconds. 4 men on their knees, zip-tied and bleeding, the same white tiger tattoo visible on 3 of their wrists. Jun-woo crossed to Catherine and Sung-min, his hands moving over his son with frantic precision, checking for wounds. Only when he'd confirmed the boy's safety did he look at Catherine. Her shoulder was bleeding again, the wound reopened by combat and exertion. Her face was pale with blood loss, but she stood steady, weapon still in hand, positioned between Sung-min and any remaining threats. "You should be dead," Jun-woo said, his voice carrying something that might have been awe. "I'm very difficult to kill," Catherine replied. "I thought you'd have learned that by now." The press conference shocked Seoul's elite like nothing in the city's criminal history. Kim Jun-woo, the Winter Dragon, head of the Baekho Syndicate, stood before cameras in a tailored suit that cost more than most vehicles. Beside him stood Catherine Parker, wearing the same midnight blue dress from the banquet, her healing shoulder covered by elegant fabric, her posture radiating quiet strength. "Effective immediately," Jun-woo announced, "I am dissolving the Baekho Syndicate's criminal operations. All assets will be liquidated and reorganized under a new foundation dedicated to protecting vulnerable women and children in Seoul's marginalized communities." The assembled press corps erupted into chaos. Cameras flashed like artillery fire. Questions overlapped into incomprehensible noise. Jun-woo waited for silence with the patience of winter itself. "This decision was not made lightly, but recent events have shown me that power without purpose is just violence with expensive suits. My son nearly died because I built an empire on fear instead of foundation. A woman I overlooked saved him because I failed to see her value until she bled for it." He turned to Catherine, and the cameras captured something Seoul's criminal elite had never witnessed: Kim Jun-woo showing public deference to another human being. "The Parker Legacy Foundation will be managed jointly by myself and Catherine Parker, who has proven herself to be the strategist, protector, and moral compass I never knew my organization needed. She will have absolute authority over the foundation's operations and direction." Catherine stepped forward, her voice steady as she addressed the cameras. "This foundation will focus on women like me, women society makes invisible, domestic workers, immigrants, refugees, anyone surviving in the margins while the powerful look through them. We will provide housing, education, legal protection, and employment opportunities. We will make sure no woman has to choose between survival and dignity." The questions came fast, journalists sensing the profound shift in Seoul's power structure, but Catherine deflected with practiced precision, always bringing the focus back to the foundation's mission, not about her, not about Jun-woo's criminal past, about the invisible women who would finally be seen. In the following months, the transformation became reality. The Baekho compound became a training center where women learned self-defense, tactical awareness, and professional skills. The syndicate's financial assets funded women's shelters across Seoul. Former territories became safe zones where domestic workers could report abuse without fear. Catherine moved through this new world with the same quiet efficiency she'd brought to everything. She was no longer invisible, but she'd learned to use visibility as strategically as she'd once used anonymity. She became the face of the foundation, while Jun-woo provided the resources and reputation. Sung-min grew up with 2 parents now. His father, learning slowly to value people over power, and Catherine, who taught him that true strength was measured in who you protected, not who you controlled. On the foundation's first anniversary, Catherine stood in the main hall, surrounded by women whose lives had been transformed. Some were former nannies like her. Some were trafficking survivors. Some were refugees who'd escaped wars Catherine understood in her bones. Jun-woo found her there, watching the celebration with the same tactical awareness she applied to everything. "Regrets?" he asked. Catherine considered the question. She'd been shot, forced into the spotlight, made into something she'd never intended to become. But she looked at the women around her, women who were finally visible, finally protected, finally valued. "No," she said simply. "I bled for this. I might as well make it count." Jun-woo's smile was soft, stripped of its usual winter edge. "You bled for my son. The rest of this," he gestured to the foundation, the women, the revolution they'd built from violence, "this is your legacy, not mine." But Catherine shook her head. "It's ours. You gave me the resources, I gave you the vision. Sung-min gave us both a reason." As if summoned, the boy appeared, 13 now, still learning to be both his father's heir and Catherine's student. He'd grown tall, his young face showing the first signs of the man he'd become, a man who'd learned to see invisible people because an invisible woman had saved his life. "The program graduates want to meet you," Sung-min told Catherine. "They're asking about the combat medical training." Catherine smiled. She'd integrated her past into the foundation's curriculum, teaching women the skills she'd learned in war zones and back alleys: how to save lives, how to read danger, how to survive in a world that tried to make them disappear. She followed Sung-min toward the graduation ceremony, Jun-woo walking beside her. Not ahead, not behind, beside. Equal partners in this strange empire built from ashes and blood and the recognition that the most dangerous people were the ones you never bothered to see. Behind them, Seoul's skyline glittered like broken glass catching sunlight. The city that had made Catherine invisible now carried her name on buildings and programs and foundations that would outlast any criminal enterprise. The Winter Dragon's empire had fallen, but something better had risen from its corpse. And at the center of it all was a woman who'd learned that being invisible was just another form of power, one that allowed you to see everything while others looked through you like air. She'd bled to prove her value, then she'd built a legacy that ensured no woman would ever have to bleed for the same reason again. The Parker Legacy Foundation, named for a nanny who'd been worth more than an empire, if only someone had bothered to look.